Today's webinar, a pretty interesting one about the right tools for your pricing. I think an interesting topic for everyone in pricing, of course, how can we solve the pricing challenge, and which tools can help me with that. And we'll also go a little bit through what the current status looks like for a lot of companies. We brought a little example of how you might solve a pricing challenge in today's world, and then also go through how new tools can help and why they might be different. So yeah, with no further ado, Ingo, do you want to go to the next slide to introduce a little bit our company? Yeah, so today we have Ingo here, our founder at Buynomics. He has over 12 years experience in pricing. He also developed the Buynomics method. And I'm Paul, I'm head of sales at Buynomics. So I'm also leading the content and insights team and previously worked in the consulting world as well. A little bit about Buynomics, what we do. We are a German software company founded by two pricing and revenue management experts with strong academic backgrounds and practical experience, over 15 years in pricing and consulting. And our method is quite unique. We'll take a look at it today, which allows you to optimize your portfolio more holistically than conventional pricing solutions. And with that, we have been working with clients across the globe and on many different continents, many different countries, and also a variety of different industries in the consumer space mainly. Yeah, so Ingo, would you like to start with the presentation?
Yeah, very much so. And thanks, Paul, for the introduction. So today's topic, just to quickly repeat that, is on pricing tools. And I think with these topics, it's always a good way to start and look at a maybe also a bit too long history of tools that have been used, not exclusively in this case for pricing, but pricing is, I think, very closely related to money, obviously, and with that also with calculating. And people have been calculating for a long time, and particularly the last two pictures are, I think, relevant because, and we'll come to that, most pricing is today still done with calculators or with Excel. And I think what we're seeing right now, and that's something that happened or started in the last decade, is that pricing is moving step by step from an Excel environment into a more SaaS environment, and we see ourselves as part of that movement, and we are seeing ourselves as one of the providers to push towards increasing the share of pricing that's been done in SaaS. Maybe alongside this, for another piece, we're currently also looking at the history of pricing. And just as the calculation here goes back a long time, pricing actually also goes back a long time. So you have pricing advice in ancient books. You have it in the Bible, for example. You have it in the Code of Hammurabi. So pricing is something, as we all know, that's very close to people's lives. And the question of how to set prices properly, the objectives have changed over time to some extent, but the question of how to set prices, how to structure an offer, have been with us for a very long time. And I think that's also part of what makes this field so interesting. So let's move into it. Before we look at the tools, I think it makes sense also to not just look at the history, but also look at what the key challenges are. And I'm happy to discuss. If you have a different view on this, we're happy to discuss this at the end of this webinar. But from our point of view, I think that the key tasks we have in pricing or revenue management more broadly is to collect the key information, collect sales data, collect customer insights. So knowing what the customers want to buy, knowing what your competitors offer, how much they charge for it, and so on. Getting all the inputs together that are key to pricing, visualizing them. I think that's always the first step. It shouldn't be the last step, but actually then also using that data, using different methods that are available to optimize prices, to optimize the products, or optimize the portfolio. And I think the key methods that are being around, I think most are aware of that, is using price elasticities, for example, calculating them, using a tool, or doing it in Excel or some other pricing, not pricing, but statistical package to determine how sales and prices are related. Then competitor pricing is something that's often been conducted, where you look at what are your competitor prices and how do you price relative to them. And there are some others, and also because, and we will see that in a quick example in a few minutes, is these different methods usually produce very different results. So when you do price elasticity-based pricing, competitor pricing, and maybe value pricing, it's very, very unlikely that these will yield the same result. And then the question is always how to use that, how to come to a conclusion. And I think what I've seen a lot in many companies is that one way is just to take that average. So elasticity-based pricing gives you a recommendation of, let's say, 10 euros. Competitive pricing gives you a price recommendation of 15, and you just take the average 12.50 of that, and that's the price you go with. That, of course, doesn't feel right. And the question is also, how can tools help with solving this issue? And after price optimization, a challenge that not every field has that, but you have it if you're in a world or in an industry where you have to deal with a large number of prices. For example, if you're, for example, in B2B, you have a large number of different customers, and each one has a different need, so a slightly different offer, slightly different willingness to pay, and you need essentially a customer-specific price or a customer-specific offer that you need to design. And for that, of course, you need to have some logic, some driver logic, where you say, as in the graphic here with the jackets, if a customer is from one industry, we go up or down with the price or with the margin, and by that way we construct a specific price. And you have a similar challenge if, for example, you have a very large number of products. For example, when you're in wholesale, spare parts, these are typical examples where you have a very large number of products that need to be priced, and this often requires some tool that helps you in differentiating the price at scale, and there are different solutions for that. Or also if you have to do some sort of dynamic pricing where you adjust prices over time for a product. So these are the typical challenge in pricing. And the question is, how are these being addressed? And I think the result here shouldn't surprise most of you. So we had a quick survey where we asked pricing managers from companies what they're using, and almost all of them, with few exceptions, still work with Excel. So this was the survey was industry agnostic. So we asked people from different industries, and this picture might look different in different industries, but I think this reflects the current status. So there's still a lot to do towards pushing pricing managers away, or nudging them to do the next step and move towards SaaS-based pricing. And I think one of the key steps here is, and we want to discuss this, is how can we show, and I think that's the key need, show that pricing with the SaaS solution is actually better than with the existing Excel world. So And I think we can go over this very quickly. So usually, like how many work today is that you have different data sources, product data, sales, and so on. And if you're working in pricing, then many of you probably are familiar with this. You have all these different inputs. You put them into an Excel sheet and then do your pricing in this Excel sheet using the different inputs. And of course, there are lots of benefits of that. It's fairly easy to do, but there are also a number of limitations with that. And these we just want to highlight in a very simple example. And for that, let me switch my screen. Paul, can you see my Excel?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So here's a very simple example, and we use it just to highlight as a starting point pricing in Excel. So it's an example we're using quite often. It's based on a real example. So the underlying dynamics are based on an actual example with the real data and a real price decision in the end. And we're using this here to highlight Excel pricing versus SaaS-based pricing that we do. And so here we have a brand that has 4 different products. In this case, it's so they're selling different nuts, peanuts in this case here. 1,000 grams, 750, 500, 200, and they have 3 competitor products here at the bottom. And they have a current price. They know their cost. They don't know the competitor cost, but it's also not relevant for them. And they have, looking at different things, determined that the price elasticity of these products is -2 for these products. And using price elasticity, as I think many know, if you know a product's price elasticity, it's easy to compute the profit optimal price, and which is when the margin of the price times the price elasticity is -1. So you can use this to compute the optimal price as you have here. So the optimal margin is 50%, and then you would go up to the proper price level that would optimize the profit using price elasticity pricing. So if this is actually the right elasticity, and for example, here it was determined using a regression analysis, that would be the right the profit optimal price in this situation. So it's very easy to compute a price here. And these are is the profit optimal price. Here's the new profit, here's the old profit, and that results in an increase of about, is it 1,500 euros. So it's about a 3.3% price increase here. If you did something else, and I think this is a very common practice in many cases, you can also look at the situation using value-based pricing. So you have these different products, you know their brand, it's our own brand, and then you have 2 competitors, A and B. You have the different sizes, and you say these are the key value drivers here in this situation. You using different analyses, surveys, looking at past data and so on, you can determine the markups and markdowns in this situation, and you can apply them. So you have a base price of 6, and then you add up a markup for brand, for size, and that gives you the product's price. And as I said before, what's often done, and this, so if you have these 2 indications, it's almost never will they yield the same result. And then you have from elasticity-based pricing a price of 18, from value-based pricing 16 for the first product, for the second it's 12 and 14. So they're close, but they're in many times, not in the last one, they're close, but they're not the same. And one way that I've seen quite a lot is to get them together is just take the average. And what we did here is finally just go for the below the price threshold, and that would be the price recommendation based on these 2 methods. This is just an example, so there are obviously very many different ways of computing a price, but essentially that's how it's often done Excel based. You have a price elasticity based price, you have maybe a value based price, you have a competitive based price, and then you aggregate them in some way. You take some sort of average, or you say, okay, we have to stay within certain margins relative to competitors and so on. So different ways, but essentially this is the logic of how you would do pricing in Excel. And of course, there are many limitations. So for example, we worked here with a constant price elasticity, and we know that in reality, price elasticity, for example, changes if you change the price. So it won't stay at -2, but it would go to -3 maybe if you increase the price. And that's very difficult to capture in a Excel model. So let's go back to the presentation. Where is it? This here, right? Paul, can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Just to summarize, so Excel, I think there, of course, otherwise no people, you wouldn't have 17 out of 20 using it. As in our survey, it's very flexible. It's very easy to do. It's very cheap. Everyone already has it, and everyone or most people already know how to work with it. And you have an answer very quickly. So I don't know if you force me to price your products in an hour from now, I would probably do something in Excel. But if you have sufficient time, there are also some limitations. It's difficult to integrate different data sources, so you always have to manually integrate sales data, for example, or surveys, everything. It's very difficult to scale a solution. So if, for example, you do that same thing across in the example we had across weeks, across different retailers and so on, that would be very difficult at some point. And you saw that we had to essentially, we didn't have a very good way to aggregate or integrate these different pricing approaches, the elasticity-based and the value-based pricing, but just took an average. So that's something that's very difficult to do much better in an Excel world. So I think that's enough motivation for a SaaS solution. And there are many on the market, I would say, and we just because the topic of the webinar was to look at the tools for pricing that are around. We just want to give an overview from our point of view. Also happy if you think something's missing here to discuss this towards the end. But I think in line with the different pricing tasks, we have tools. So for example, survey tools that help you now much faster than with traditional market research companies to gain insights. For example, if you want to test a price threshold for a new product, or you want to test a new product feature, how people would feel about that. Or if in Germany, for example, we just did a survey ourselves, one of these quick surveys, the Zone, like an app that lets you watch sports event. They just doubled the price from 15 to 30 euros. So you can have a quick survey to understand how people would react to that. So how many customers you would lose. So you don't have to do like a full conjoint to understand that, but have a very quick survey. And these are now with SaaS solutions much faster than they used to be. Also, companies collect competitor prices through crawlers. These are also very fast and cheap compared to what was available earlier. And I think, but the more relevant tools cover topics like, how do I set up my portfolio? So pack price architecture, but also what features to include in, for example, a telco portfolio. This is something we do very often. These are all questions that are difficult to answer in Excel, but are increasingly more easy or naturally been solved in the proper SaaS solution. Also steering promotions from week to week, quickly aligning pricing goals with the proper implications about products and pricing, looking at how to price or how to deal with innovations, what innovations make sense, and also what you often have in pricing. And that was very difficult, or is still very difficult in an Excel environment, or with like all tools is are actually wargaming games where you look at if you make a move, so you increase or decrease the price or introduce a new product, what is a likely reaction from your competitors, and what is your best counter move to that again, and so on. So you can, it's very easy with, and I can just highlight that in a minute. It's very easy to do these wargaming exercises or in a proper SaaS solution, much easier than these are in an Excel environment where you have to set up the specific case each time, and the dynamics are often not well replicated within the tool. All right, so and I think it's, as an example, it makes sense that we look at the solution that we're building, because that's the one we're most familiar with. And to start with these SaaS solutions, it's much easier to integrate all the key data. So sales data you can attach so that these are already in the tool and you don't have to do the manual work. Competitor data as well, product data are big, you can manage. So the different attributes and features within the tool, cost, everything that's relevant for pricing. And these are typically then also integrated in a common logic. I will show you this in a minute. And I think some of the advantage, in addition to being able with cloud-based computing to do much better modeling of how different pricing will play out in reality, are some other advantages. So for example, it's typically much faster. If you do large scale computing, you will know that Excel has some issues with that. And also an important point is with the SaaS solution is security. So you can't send your Excel with your pricing to the wrong email address, or you can't, if you lose your computer or it gets stolen, you're not losing any important information that's in a SaaS tool rather than on your hard drive. So these are just some of the advantages of these SaaS solutions. And of course, you can also, it's much easier to cooperate in larger teams when you don't have local Excel files where no one knows what the right version is or the latest version, but rather you have a central tool that people can work on at the same time and so on. So I think the central problem and the most difficult problem that we saw in the Excel was how to work with different methods. And in the example, it was price elasticity and value-based pricing. There we just did both and took the average of them, but that's obviously not the best way to do it. And I think that the hard problem, the one that we solved, is how to integrate different insights and make the best use of it. And what we did is essentially what we call the virtual customer or virtual shopper. And the idea is to actually replicate the purchasing decision you have at a shop, at a retailer, on your website or anything else, and have these virtual shoppers give them essentially the same preferences and willingness to pay that your real customers would have, show them your products in different variations against your actual competitor products, your actual competitor prices, and so on, and see what they will do. And these virtual customers, we can essentially, using different data inputs, educate to behave very closely to your real customers. And then you can essentially use the tool to simulate what would happen if you increase the price, decrease the price, identify a profit optimal price for consumer markets, but also a profit optimal price, for example, as in a B2B environment for a specific customer with specific properties or specific industry, specific size, specific sales procurement process, and so on. So you can do all of these things and let the tool help you find the optimal price. So how would that look? What would that look like? And I'm using the same example we just had in the Excel. Paul, can you see the browser?
Yes, we can see the browser.
Perfect. So here's the example that we had before. So the value drivers, we have you have size and brand. We also have promotion, but we're not using it here. So we have the different sizes as before. We have the different brands. We have our own brand and competitors A and B. We're not using the others, and we can use it to set up the offer just as in the Excel file. So here's our 4 own products, 3 competitor products. All the promotions are turned off here. And here, essentially, you can use this. You can do this manually, or you can set it up automatically, look at the different features, change everything you want, enter your costs, margins, so everything that might be relevant, you can play with here. And then this is the heart of the whole thing. Look at how such a simulation would play out in reality. So we have the status quo as in the Excel. So these are just the same numbers, but here we can model how demand would change if we have a price change. So for example, if we increase the price of a product, we see how the units change based on these virtual shoppers that we showed previously, where their behavior, their buying behavior replicates the real behavior. So there are different techniques to extract that. So for example, using surveys or using past sales data to understand how customers would react to a price change. And you see, okay, and that's also something that's difficult in an Excel. You see we lose some customers on this product, but we gained some of them back on the others. And we lose only 5 to a competitor, and 5 customers will not buy anything at all anymore after this change. And we see we have a quite high elasticity because we're only changing this one product. And when we also change the price of a different product, then we see that the elasticity goes down because the rest of the portfolio has become a bit less attractive, and some of the customers of the smaller package here go to the larger one. So these are all difficulties that you have in an Excel model that are much easier to replicate in a SaaS solution with the proper modeling in the background. And also what I mentioned before is this wargaming. So it's very easy to also play with the competitor prices and then see how that affects our own portfolio. So this one is very small, but if I increase the price here, then I see that I'm gaining in these other products. So there are many things, and of course it's very easy to also look then at the profit optimum, price, and then see what that turns out to be. And when I do that, and I go back to the presentation. Paul, can you see the presentation?
Yeah.
I can't see my mouse. I go back to the presentation, and this is also based on a real example. We see that with the more precise modeling, so we're comparing here the Excel optimization we did, only here in this case, only the price elasticity part, not the value-based part, with what came out of our solution, and we see that the precision is much higher. And in this case, the price recommendation that came out of the Excel actually was losing money, was much worse. And this is just to highlight what the proper simulation that you only can have in a proper SaaS solution, you can't do in Excel. What advantages that brings, not only in how easy it is to manage price changes, but also in the quality of the results, and with that, the quality of your pricing actions. So I think Paul, we're at the end of our time. So I'll just quickly, I'll quickly go to the questions.
Sounds good. I have one question here from Roxana, who's asking, how is the tool dealing with SKUs that are in a relationship, in parentheses, ladders relationship, but only a few have significant sales history? Let's say pens in 5 colors, only a few colors will sell. So I'm assuming it's about like subcategories or groups of products where you don't have history on some of them, and whether you can still make assumptions or predictions for those.
So I think that there are 2 distinct cases. The one is the one we had in our example with the different peanut sizes, where you actually want to position them against each other, and you've had one of them in promotion and the other one not, where you have in a history of data where you see how customers react to relative price changes. So these are, if I don't know, you usually work with 2 or 3 years of historical data, you can pick these effects, you can pick up these effects and use them, and that works very well in the modeling. If you have something like pens or different flavors of yogurts, where you don't want to have different prices, but you just have like a variety of products, then and they have always had the same price in the past, then these are difficult to model using historical data. If you say, okay, my red pen should have a different price than the blue pen for whatever reason, you can add, you can ask that, for example, in a survey, as we highlighted before, to understand how people value these pens differently. So this can usually be done with a very small budget, and you can then integrate that interaction into the model, and essentially update the model so that you can see what happens if your pens have different prices. So, but that's the question. So would people who want to buy a red pen buy a blue pen just because it's 10 cents cheaper? That you need to find out in a survey.
Okay. Then I just answered another question from Matthias, who was asking basically, is it correct that you need price variations in the data that your virtual customer models are built upon to simulate how price changes would play out? And I wrote basically that that's correct. If nothing changes, the sales data doesn't tell us anything about buyer behavior, but this is on a market level, right? So yeah, it's not only one product, yeah, but
you don't have to. So all changes count. So if you have, for example, in consumer goods, you have promotions that go on and off almost all the time. And that produces variations that we use to estimate customer behavior. So price changes are needed, but not necessarily of the product we're looking at. There needs to be, in the industry, there need to be price changes to see how customers react to them. And also the tool uses product changes. So for example, if you change, as in the example before, if you remove the 500 grams and then you sell more of 750 and 250, that also tells a lot about customer preferences. So you don't have to have a price change in a specific product, but you need to have variation in the industry. If you have, for example, if you're working across different categories or different countries, the method can also borrow insights from near cases. So you can use insights from one country and apply them to the next. This is obviously not the best solution, but if there's nothing else available, then this is often helpful. And so there's a variety of different things to do here.
Great. We have some more questions, so feel free to stick around if you want to. Otherwise, you also get the recording by email after, and also potentially the slides if you're interested. Martijn is asking, would you retrain a model on new data or adapt a new model while deploying? I'm assuming he's asking kind of, do we have a machine learning algorithm that can improve? How do you understand that question, Ingo?
Yeah, so the normal way is that the training doesn't happen from scratch, but once it's set up, it's updated using different Bayesian techniques to update customer preferences, and that has to be in. So in many industries, telco, for example, the willingness to pay per data volume, per gigabyte, decreases over time. So things like that need to be taken account of, or maybe preferences between brands change over time. So these are all things that the model needs to account for, and for that it's usually updated, for example, every quarter, depending on the context.
Yeah. And Cesare or Cesare is asking, have you ever monitored or verified how deep your predictions were respected in the real world? I mean, do you run the simulation model and then apply recommendations, but how's real life reacting? So I'm assuming he's asking about predictions versus real life.
Yeah.
Maybe you can speak a bit about like back testing versus A/B testing and whether we have done that.
Yeah, so there are, depending on industry, different tests you can do. So for example, if you're working as we do with internet or software companies, for them it's very natural to do A/B tests, and that we do. For a consumer goods company, that's not the natural thing to do, that you run A/B tests, but you test different promotions. That's something you can do often do quickly, or you introduce a new product or product variation and see if the effect shows up that was predicted. So these are all things we do often. As for example, when we do get started in a pilot, we do like say often a post-diction where we predict something that happened in the past, new product introduction or a new variation, to demonstrate that the tool works. And for that, we use the data up to the event, and then predict what will happen in the event, for example, a new product. So there are, and it depends on the industry, different techniques to work with. And we already have, I would say, a lot of experience what test makes sense in which industry to show the precision of the solution.
Great. And the precision, I think we also saw that on the slides, is usually very, very high, right, Ingo?
Yeah.
So I think the R squared is often over 95%, and that's kind of the benchmark that we want to reach, depending, of course, on data quality, availability, et cetera, et cetera. Kayla is also asking, how would you reconcile the max sales view and max profit view into a balanced decision, especially from a total company portfolio perspective? So I guess you can maybe speak a little bit about optimizing on a product level versus a portfolio level, and versus a annual level, perhaps.
Yeah. So in the example that we had, the max profit or max revenue, they apply to the whole portfolio. So it looks for the prices that optimize the whole portfolio, not the individual products. If you're optimizing a portfolio of products, it's typically that so if you're looking for the profit optimum, then typically all products are more expensive than they would be if you were just optimizing that individual product. So, and with the solution, essentially what the solution does is it provides transparency. It doesn't tell you maximize your profit or revenue or something, but it provides transparency on what will happen when you do that. So the strategic question of what you want to achieve is still yours to make. But if the company says we want to maximize short-term profit, then the solution tells you how to do that. If you want to increase growth or market share, the solution will tell you what prices will do that for you. So the strategic decision, essentially, that you have to answer yourself, and the tool provides the transparency what that means. But these things are much faster than with an Excel world, or where you have to have some consulting company to set that up for you. For example, we have customers of us have looked at questions like, does it make to introduce a new product? Does it make sense to introduce a new brand, so a second brand under which we sell our products, where you essentially have to ask yourself, how close should that second brand be to our primary brand? And then you can essentially within minutes, as you've seen, simulate or do the wargaming, how much market share that new brand would gain, how much it would gain from us versus how much from competitors. So a large strategic question as introducing a new secondary brand can essentially be answered in real time in a workshop. And if you want to dig more into details, you can do that, but you have a very strong answer immediately once it's set up and essentially free of cost.
All right, I think last question that I see here in the chat, feel free to add more, of course. Anders is asking how we deal with situational pricing. Can we, for instance, add weather data? Can you speak a little bit about maybe differentiating what we do versus situational, which maybe dynamic pricing goes into that direction?
Yeah. So that can be done. Where we're coming from is more like the long-term pricing. So how to like set up like a promotion calendar over a quarter or so on, where weather is not known yet. But things like weather have an impact from what we see mostly on, or to a large extent on the market size, and that's something that the tool can cope with. So if you know, I don't know, you're selling ice cream and next week is warmer than expected, and that has an effect on the total amount of ice cream that's been sold, then that's captured by the solution that you can work with. And then you still have the additional question of do you run a promotion in that warmer week, or does it make more sense to increase prices or do whatever in the context of that potentially larger sale because of higher temperature.
All right. Great. I think a bit over time already, but that's of course thanks to this great discussion that we've seen today. You all receive the recording by email. Ingo, if you want to go to the next slides, showing the next webinars that we have in the pipeline here on behavioral concepts for revenue management and pricing. And also we're going to be joined by our friends from the EPP, the European Pricing Forum, soon, where we explain a little bit more about pricing with AI. So stay tuned and check your inbox for those invites, and looking forward to seeing you guys at the next few webinars. Thanks, Ingo.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks everyone, and have a good weekend. And looking forward to the next webinar. Hope you will all join. And if you have any questions or want to discuss some of these points, then of course we're always open and happy to do so. Just leave a message, best with Paul, and then yeah, let's talk then.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thanks. Have a great weekend. Bye.
You too.